Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z Martin, and tonight we are talking about the Thin Blue Salt Line, law enforcement agents, the real ones this time, in Supernatural. But before we get started, let's let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes, a fan since season 3 and a fiction writer since 2012. And you can find me on Twitter as true_firesign10 and all my fic on AO3 under firesign10.
And Keith.
I'm Keith RA DeCandido. I have been a fan of Supernatural since the first season, actually. I've written 3 Supernatural novels, which by the mythology of the show makes me a prophet. I wrote Nevermore, Bone Key, and Heart of the Dragon, which came out in 2007, 2008, and 2010. Mm-hmm. And I also done a couple of other things connected to the franchise. And just generally, I've been writing fiction since 1994. Most recently, a thriller about a serial killer who targets people who harm animals, as well as a novella about the Jersey Devil. I've also written a lot of police procedurals, so this is a both straight up police procedurals and fantastical police procedurals that mix the science fiction and fantasy elements with cop stuff. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. So.
Well, great. Lola?
I'm Lola Lariscy. I'm a writer and Supernatural fan, and I'm owned by 2 dogs and a cat.
As are we all. Mm-hmm. I'm Gail Z Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and the last 2 U.S. Marshals after the collapse of society and Wasteland Marshals. And as Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, which also has a lot of cops and detectives and private investigators. And Supernatural fan since 2011. I made up for starting late by going down the rabbit hole and never coming up for air. So there are a lot of cops in Supernatural, not counting when the brothers pass themselves off as everything from bikini inspectors to fish and wildlife FBI. And usually the cops are not helping them, but we do have a few standouts from that. Now, I want to start with Victor Hendrickson because I know otherwise Keith is going to be sitting there drumming his fingers going, when's she going to get to Hendrickson? So we might as well just get it off the table first and let Keith indulge his Hendrickson fixation.
Keith and both Keith and I.
Yeah. Yes. So kick us off with this in Hendrickson, Keith.
Well, I loved the entire concept of the character, both how he was introduced, because let's face it, if from the point of view of somebody in law enforcement who doesn't know that there really are things that go bump in the night out there, what the boys are doing is some pretty yucky stuff. Digging up graves and living off the grid and I mean, I love when the way he was describing the life they lived as they grew up as, being some kind of like prepper or something that, crazed militia type, and from the outside, that's what it would look like. I also liked the fact that Hendrickson was actually good at his job. All too often in situations like this, the person chasing our heroes has to be, to an extent, he has to be incompetent because if he succeeds, the show's over. But at the very least, Hendrickson got better with each time, and then eventually, of course, he found out about it. Justin Bello remains one of my absolute favorite episodes of Supernatural. Partly because once Hendrickson realized the truth, he jumped right in on it. And what I especially like, because one of the things I liked about Hendrickson, and Justin Bello proved it, but even before that, Hendrickson is pretty much who Dean would have been if he had become an FBI agent. Personality-wise, they're both incredibly similar. And we saw that in Justin Bello, where they worked like they've been working together all their lives as they were fighting. And I was really disappointed when they killed him at the end. I thought that was a total blown opportunity, which they sort of made up for later with our two sheriffs, which I'm sure we'll talk about in great depth. But that was a real opportunity to do something cool with, them being fugitives. There's a limit as how much you can do that because it gets in the way of actually telling the stories they need to tell. But it was a fun little side thing, and it was something I thought they could have played with a little bit more, especially if they had somebody on the inside like Hendrickson.
Yeah, and I know that, like you said, it would have gotten in the way of the story, and also to an extent, even if they'd have flipped him to being an ally, they still, for the sake of the story, were trying to keep the boys kind of isolated.
Yeah.
But yes, Hendrickson would have been a great person to extend that. And, of course, he did also give us the wonderful metaphor of he's the Bonnie to your Clyde, which Dean agreed to without a hesitation. So
it wasn't going to be Bonnie.
Yeah, whatever. Well, he had the hair for it,
Well,
yeah. So, other thoughts on Hendrickson while we're on the topic, Carole?
I adore Victor Hendrickson. I think he's just wonderful. First of all, let's mention the actor is terrific. Charles Malik Whitfield nailed that. He had a limited part, and in his 4 or 5 episodes, he had a fully fleshed character. He took us from, oh my God, we hate him, to oh my God, we love him, to mourning his death. He was solid as a rock. So kudos, Charles Malik Whitfield. Hendrickson was so good because he was, as Keith mentioned, he's competent so many times because they're in these little towns and they're backwoods, and you have these sheriffs and stuff who are just like can barely sign their name on the forms or whatever, right? Hendrickson was aces. He was top in his field, and he knew what he was doing, and he was super competent. His description of John Winchester is like poetry, where he's like, here we have our quintessential Marine gone rogue. Okay. And he nailed every aspect of John, but viewed from the mundane viewpoint, so that it's like, you're like, oh my God, this guy would have been a kook, right? But he doesn't know, of course, what's really happening. So we have the beautiful 2-3 episodes where he's chasing them, and he either just misses them, or we have the great Folsom Prison Blues where the lawyer switches out the cemeteries for a very suspenseful finale, and finally Justin Bellow, and there he is. He has them. He lost them over the shapeshifters, but now he's got them. They're in the cell. They're trying to be smartass about who shot the sheriff and stuff, but he finally finds out it happens in front of him, and he cannot deny the reality of demons exist. This netherworld exists, and he does not waste any time thinking or talking about, well, this can't be, blah, blah, blah. He is a man of action, and he switches tracks and he goes for it. He'll parse it out later if he needs to. But right now, what he needs to know is there are demons surrounding that place. They're killing people. What do I need to do? And he does it. And it's beautiful. And to see him working in sync with the boys there is like a dance. They're moving, he's moving. They're so in sync because, once again, even like Keith said, this is just about who Dean could have been if he'd been on that side of the law. And so they're able to take direction from each other and work together seamlessly, and it's beautiful. And when we lose him at the end of that episode, it's a freaking tragedy. Okay, it's a tragedy. We've lost this enormously intelligent, very attractive, let's not leave that by the wayside, very attractive, wonderful person who could have been such an ally, and he's ripped from them. And that's the way it is in supernatural world.
Before I come to Lola for this, there's something important we forgot with Keith, which is in your books, you give, and it's kind of retconned, the first Victor Hendrickson sighting.
Technically, yeah, I didn't even realize it until it was pointed out on one of the Supernatural wikis. Actually mentioned. I didn't realize I had done this in Nevermore, since it took place in the second season. When at that point it was after the events in St. Louis that led to Hendrickson chasing them, but it was before they actually met Hendrickson. So, which I intellectually knew, but didn't really put it all together. So I put a scene at the end of Nevermore where Hendrickson shows up in New York to because he's got a lead on them being there. They've already left at this point, but and he talks to a cop that they've been working with, and I put it was totally gratuitous. There was no need for that to be there. I put it there because I wanted to write Hendrickson, and it turns out that it's actually technically chronologically Hendrickson's first appearance. So that was fun, and he was so much fun.
I have to say that I wrote a story where Hendrickson survives Justin Bellow, and it was like he said, it's so much fun to take that character and let him live. You know, and go on and everything, because he was cut short so heinously.
He's one of those people like Missouri Mosley and some others who have lived on in fan fiction far longer than they did in the series. So they have a long and productive life in fan fiction.
He has a very strong presence in many stories and in many ways. But yes, mine was that he survived the explosion and then has to deal with all of that, all of that happening. I hated to see him. I hated to see him go.
I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Keith?
No, nothing. Go ahead. Lola, it's Lola's turn.
I was going to say, Carole, I feel like you need to either write a biography or a book of love poems for Hendrickson. I'm not sure which one, maybe all put together with some poems at the beginning of each chapter, really fancy script to your love. And also I had a thought when you were saying that, he finally saw it was real. I was like, it's a Scully moment. Although I don't think Scully ever had her Scully moment. She never really did see. And then what I was going to say, was he like the first law enforcement character who traversed through different episodes? Like he was a recurring character? Because until Mills
got to Jody and Donna.
Yeah, I think he was the only one who was recurring that I can think of, because he seared in my mind because of that. And he was such a thorn in their side. It was like, real life is catching up to them. They can't just skip out of town and forget all the dead people in their wake. They actually got called on the dead people.
I mean, what is it? Is it the night shifters sneak out in the SWAT uniforms? And
while Sex is playing, yes.
Barely escaped by the skin of their teeth. And they're like, we have to go to like Yemen now. We have to go so deep.
In a show that used music superlatively, I still think that particular use of Renegade was probably the best use of music in the history of the show. That was just perfectly done.
Yeah, really stunning. Well, and it's also the same kind of thing in Folsom City Prison, when they are escaping at the cemetery, and we're waiting because we know the guys are going to the cemetery, and we don't realize that the lawyer switched them.
Right.
And we're hearing, what is it, the Alice in Chains rooster, and that too, it's that same super strong, they're just getting away because Hendrickson is that good.
Yeah. I agree with all of that, and I would have loved to have seen him last longer, but hey, at least we have fan fiction.
Yes.
So let's go for Jody Mills. When we first meet her, she is pretty much by the book. She puts up with Bobby Singer, the town drunk. And then
I love that revelation that he was known around as the town drunk, and that just completely gobsmacked Dean and Sam, because he's the most together person in their life, and it just didn't, Yeah.
That revelation was great to watch.
And again, from the outside.
Yeah. What do you mean he's not the town drunk? Bobby Singer's the town drunk. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
And of course we also get Jody's Scully moment. When
I don't think actually it's not so much a Scully moment, it's a Brandon from Galaxy Quest moment. I knew it. Yeah.
But she, like Hendrickson, just rolls with it. There is no, I'm going to have an existential crisis about this. There is no, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's just, all right, who do I shoot? And we don't know whether she sits down with a fifth of Jack afterwards and decompresses. But in the moment, she is right where she needs to be doing her job. So Lola, kick us off on Jody.
Well, I think maybe the reason why she's so calm and blasé is she's had the worst thing you can have happen to her. And my heart breaks every time I'm reminded of her story. Every time they do a flashback, I'm like, no, take it back. She was born on the day we saw her. She had no back history, nothing bad. She's happy and she's got a cute little haircut. But then we see flashbacks with the longer hair and she had a family. And I'm like, no. So I think once you've been through that, nothing really rocks your boat anymore.
That's true. And even going through that, she held it together to do what she needed to do. So I'm sure she broke down later in some way, shape, or form. But in the moment, like a true warrior, she kept it all together and hung in there to do what had to happen. Keith.
Also, that, and this applies to both Hendrickson and Mills, part of why they didn't, they're trained to follow the evidence, and the evidence was right in front of them of what was going on. In Jody's case, particularly gruesomely with what happened to her family, and in Hendrickson with his boss having black smoke come out of his mouth. So that, when confront, these are people who are trained to follow the evidence and to see where the evidence leads. And also people who are trained to react in essence, a combat situation. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense that both of them would ante up and kick in when confronted with this, because they can't hesitate. Hesitating is the sort of thing that gets you killed in that line of work anyway. So you don't want to, so yeah, they jumped in, and yeah, afterward, yeah, definitely fifth of Jack for sure. I love the character of Jody so much. Kim Rhodes imbued her with such tremendous gravitas and depth. I mean, you could see, what Lola was talking about how you just want to hug her every time you think about her backstory, and you can sort of see that backstory is always sort of like right behind her eyes, but she doesn't let it get to her. Every once in a while, it'll pop out, and she sort of takes on the mother role with the kids, or at least the cool aunt role, I think, with Sam and Dean, which is really nice to see. And I also love her complete lack of patience with nonsense, which is, I think, one of the reasons why she gets along with Bobby so well. And we see it especially in Hibbing 911 when she first meets
Donna.
And
just her entire attitude toward the whole thing is just priceless.
And Jody and Missouri Mosley are both two of the only people who have ever kind of dared to mother Sam and Dean in terms of, don't put your feet on my coffee table, right. Or, leave your shoes, don't you wear those boots in the house? Nobody else talks to them. And here they are, big bad demon hunters that the legions of hell fear. And she's saying, don't you do that. Yeah. Or the priceless discussion about sex education at the table with the girls.
Hysterical.
With the Sam and Dean going, okay.
We have to be here for this.
Yeah.
Carole, how about you?
I love Jody. And it was so refreshing to meet her. Once again, here was, first of all, a Leo who is strong and competent. She may be in a small town or small area, but she is not of a small brain. She's smart, she's on the ball. Of course, at first she's all caught up in like, oh my gosh, my son has returned to me. And you kind of can't blame her for that, because we would all kind of be like, oh, look, this person who's the most important person in the world has returned. And, but then it goes horribly, horribly wrong. And she does, she rolls with it. She cannot refute what is happening in front of her eyes. And so she does what she has to do, and we see that then throughout her subsequent episodes. She's always very on target, very focused. What do we need to do, and who do I point my gun at? And yet cognizant of the other people around her, because she does want to enfold Dean and Sam, into her bosom a little bit. And we do have that never to be followed up on brief moment with Bobby, where we're like, her and Bobby could have been magic, really, for both of them. And it will always be in the mists and in fan fiction. And she goes through some bad shit, but she is always in there pitching. I think Hibbing is just hilarious. It's just, they take her stoicism and her forthrightness, and they play it so well against Donna and the whole situation. And it's a case fic monster of the week, but it's freaking hilarious at the same time. So she lends herself to any and all of that. I think Kim was tremendously versatile in portraying that character, and yet always staying true to that character. There was never anything where we looked at her and said, the hell is she doing that for? And I may have my own particular issues with Wayward Sisters, but nonetheless, even there, she was strong. She was, trying to lead this group. I personally feel that the original idea would have been fantastic. And when I first heard it, and that it was going to be her or her with Donna, I was like, I am so there. There's a character with layers. There's a character with depth. There's a character they can do so much with and reach out with. And they didn't. And it could
have been Cagney and Lacey with ghosts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rizzoli and Isles with ghosts. Any one of those kinds of team ups where you have these different attributes of these very strong characters. So much can be played off them. They can be funny, they can be poignant, they can be angsty. And they went with vapid teenage girls. So
hold that thought, because we do have a Wayward Sisters panel coming up. But now we've talked about Donna, but there's that counterpart. Yeah, we've talked about Jody. There's the counterpart in Donna. So Keith, what do you think about Donna?
I adore Donna for a number of reasons. Part of it is how vanishingly rare it is on television to have a character who does not fit the idealized model of what somebody should look like. And while that was sort of the point in her first appearance, I like the fact that it didn't define the character after that. It did, obviously, in the first appearance, because that's what it was all about. But she moved past that, which I was grateful for. And she evolved into basically a supernatural version of Marge Gunderson from Fargo, Frances McDormand's character. That's basically who she is. She's this sweet, unassuming person who is nonetheless much smarter than you think she is. And much better at her job than you think she is. And certainly better than the men assume she is. She's somebody who's very similar to Jody. Her attitude is different because her personality is different, but she approaches the job the same way. Okay, sorry, something just fell off my. Okay. Anyway, but she's also just incredibly sweet and wonderful, and I love the fact that she, in Hibbing 911, when she first meets Jody, she's completely, just annoys the hell out of Jody just because she's so aggressively nice, and then it turns out she already knows at least to some extent, what's going on and handles it just fine. And I am seriously disappointed that we're not going to get, you know, the TV show with the two of them, or even just a buddy movie with the two of them.
Yeah, I agree. Lola?
You betcha. Isn't she from Minnesota? That's my best Minnesota. That's you betcha. I love that. That like, oh, I'm from the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and it's very cold here, and we're very sweet. I just love that. I love it so much. But like Keith said, she can get down to business. When you know, when it really comes down to it, she can do her gun and get somebody in a hold and everything. She knows what she's doing. She's not sheriff for nothing. And I want so badly to go to that retreat. I just want to go and be there. I just love it so much. It's like a lodge. It looks like one of those old lodges, you know, where they would have, but I don't know, those fraternal meetings, you know, that your great uncle went to and he had a ring and everything. It just looks like one. Yeah, it looks like one of those places. And I just want to go and be there and drink coffee. I'm not in police, but I just want to be there. It's just so cool. And I just love her and Jody together. They're just so perfect because Jody's so coarse and stoic, but Donna's not going to take no for an answer. She's going to be her friend, and so aggressive. But you know, you start to see Jody kind of wear down a little bit. And I think when Jody sees how confident Donna is and sees that there's a lot more beneath just the aggressive teariness, she really starts to like her. And they depend on each other, because I'm sure it's not easy to be a female sheriff in the United States. Probably not many of them. And so, you know, they kind of form their own little buddy network, which I think is really awesome. And I want to slap her ex-husband. I just want to knee him. I want to put my foot in his face and watch him go over the side of the cliff and all those things. And no one will arrest me because he deserves it. He was.
Well, you know, one of the things that people have pointed out is in the episode at the spa where there's the sucker monster,
Right.
and Donna admits that she's trying to lose some weight because her husband left, and she feels very insecure. And Dean is right there with her eating those donuts. He doesn't shame her. He is right in there, and he agrees that Doug is a jerk. And you know, so that's great. Dean Dean Winchester affirming that she is just fine the way she is.
Mhm.
Now go ahead.
I feel like she and Dean kind of bond with that donut moment, and that they're set after that. They know each other, they got each other, they're good to go. And I think Donna shows Jody that it's okay to have your feelings and have your soft side. It's okay. You can still be businesslike. You can still get all the bad guys, but you don't have to always be so narrow focused and possibly even abrasive at times, like in Hibbing, where Jody's like, well, I want to know this. And Donna's like, so how's your daughter? You know, things. And she's got that whole networking thing. And that Jody sees her doing it and is like, oh, okay. So I think she's valuable to Jody to show that the feelings are okay and we can still show them. And I think Jody shows her it's okay to be strong. You know, just because your ex was because he was that, you can still be strong. And that's why I think they work out so well, you know, as a duo, you know, light and dark a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, one of the
and that's not just because of the hair.
Yeah. Now, one of the people that we only got to see once, I would have loved to see her again, particularly in the Hibbing 911 Sheriff's Retreat episode, because the Benders takes place in Hibbing. So Kathleen should have been at that retreat.
That would have
Unless
been beautiful.
that episode she got out of law enforcement and said, okay, I solved my brother's murder. I'm going to run a coffee shop in Key West now.
Which is perfectly plausible. Yeah.
Which is totally plausible.
Hot money.
there was something I wanted to mention that just in general about the way the show dealt with law enforcement, because it's one of those things. It's an artifact of the show's filming location, because they filmed in Vancouver. they tended to go to small towns because they could make the outskirts of Vancouver look like pretty much any small town. But I think to some extent it worked in their favor. There was something I wrote was for a supernatural project that never happened for a variety of reasons. But there was a bit that Bobby wrote that I put together, which I thought sort of worked out nicely. Just saying it's advice Bobby is giving to hunters, which is that a lot of times the monsters that you're hunting are going to be in the small towns and the suburbs. And the reason for that's simple. Monsters, as a general rule, are killers. Most of the time, a hunter goes some places because they heard about someone dying weird. Not always, but more often than not, a body being dropped is involved. And when bodies get dropped, the cops get involved. Now, you go to a big city, you got a big city police force. They've got a budget and manpower and all that stuff. And they usually put the smart ones in charge of investigating homicides. Brings down all kinds of heat that makes it hard for the monsters to do what they need to do. Now, in a small town, you got a sheriff that's in charge of the whole county, or state police in charge of the whole state, or a really tiny local police force. Sheriffs are elected, which is about the dumbest way to pick your law enforcement professionals. And I say that as someone whose best local ally is the county sheriff. That was my reference to Jody there. But mostly you get folks whose best skill is handshaking and baby kissing. And if you're lucky, they might have grown a police-related skill, but it ain't damn likely. So the monsters stick with the sticks, because the people in charge of figuring out who did the bad stuff are generally idiots. And that, I thought, it's not something I think they planned, but I think the nature of the show of them always going, it makes sense. It makes sense that, especially in the modern age when you've got police procedure has improved so much in the past 35, 40 years. Forensic technology in particular has improved so much that it'd be a lot harder for a monster to be able to do what they do in a big city that has a budget for this sort of thing. Whereas in a small town, they don't have to deal with this kind of crap very often, so they'd be out of their depth anyhow. It's also one of the reasons why Sam and Dean were able to waltz in as FBI agents, because they're automatically going to Bigfoot any of the small town cops there anyhow.
Well, and the prevalence of cameras in cities as
Yes.
opposed to little tiny one stoplight towns.
Yeah, and that's become more so since Supernatural started. I mean, it wasn't as big a deal in 2005, and it became so over the course of the next several years.
Of course, as they're vampires, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, this is true. So Lola, thoughts on Kathleen from The Benders?
Well, I don't remember much about her, but I recognize the actress. I've seen her in other stuff. I think she's very pretty. She kind of looks like Jody, like she could be Jody's sister almost. And I'm sure I liked her. I'm sure it was a great episode. I just don't remember her.
Well, we're all hoping that Sam didn't get eaten or shot, so I can understand that. Carole, any thoughts about Kathleen?
I love Kathleen. I think for a one shot, she's terrific. She is trying to go by the book, but she can't help but be moved by Dean's story when he finally is honest with her and isn't trying to pretend he's a, large black police person. And she's sympathetic because of her own loss. Fuzzy if it's her brother or her cousin, but it was
Her brother.
brother. Yeah. And so she's sympathetic, and she kind of in the back of her brain, she knows something hinky is happening in the hills there, and that, and she helps him. And I thought that was terrific of her to do that. And she went as far as she could with some of that, and he's like, well, could I have a, no. And she's like, I thought it would be better once I knew, but it's really not. And that is how it is. Closure is something, but it ain't everything. Dead is dead and gone is gone. And she expresses that, but she's a terrific character. And I know her from NCIS, where she had a recurring role as Agent Paula Cole. I forget.
That's where I know her.
She's a blonde agent who was in frequently, at least like a dozen episodes, and then actually died on the show. Her character died in a really heartbreaking and sacrificial way, where she sacrificed herself to save her team, kind of thing. And on that too, she was just terrific, very strong, but yet with that vulnerability. She wasn't, made out of brick or stone. She was doing her job the best she could, but she was you know, she had pain and she had suffering, and we got to see that, you know, and she was very compelling, I thought.
Okay, Keith?
Not much to add to that. I mean, I liked her too. And I thought that she you know, handled it as well as possible under the circumstances. If I'm remembering right, though, the Bender's just like one of the few where there wasn't actually a supernatural thing. It was
Right.
And I think that was part of the.
That was
part
the
of
people
what-
are crazy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it's one of the things I really love about that episode, because sometimes people are just nuts, and
They were.
yeah, and I thought it was handled really well, and I kind of wish they'd done that sort of thing more often. But she was great, and I would have liked to have found out what happened to her later. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, she just got lost. You know, 15 years you'd lose people in the shuffle. But and I'm a firm believer in your theory, Gail, that she moved to Key West and opened a coffee shop.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I thought what was interesting is, you know, Sam leaves her in that basement holding the gun on one of the vendors.
Right.
And the look passes between them, and he knows damn well what she's going to do, and he doesn't begrudge it at all. And he walks out, and you hear the gunshot, and she says, trying to escape.
Yeah. If that had been his brother, would he have done any different?
Yeah.
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 And I think both boys knew exactly what she did and backed her 100%. And that also makes me think that after having done that, maybe she just got gone, because that might have been hard to sell, or may not. There were a lot of
Television's portrayal of same notwithstanding, police involved shootings are usually very traumatic experiences for the cop involved, and also ones that involve a tremendous amount of paperwork. But and often, and usually once after an officer has discharged their weapon, they usually wind up riding a desk for a while. And some of them, you know, especially if a life is being taken, don't get over it. And it's perfectly possible that she, you know, even if she did stay a cop, she may have stayed on a desk from that point forward.
I can even see her really at that point. She's solved the mystery of her brother, and you know what? She's done. She closes out whatever she needs to do, and, you know, goes off to make a new life somewhere, because she doesn't want to. I could see her not wanting to stay there. Everything's going to be a memory.
Yeah.
I'm going to, you know, it's done. I've avenged him. I'm out of here. You know, that's kind of what I would see her doing.
Now, one of the others that we only saw for one episode, and that was in The Usual Suspects, but that was Detective Ballard, played by Linda Blair, famous for being in The Exorcist. But again, you know, she was the one who is figuring this all out, and she knows something doesn't fit. And the least likely explanation turns out to be true. So again, a bit part of only one episode, but I would have loved to have seen more from her. Any thoughts on Detective Ballard?
I thought she did a really great job in terms of, once again, the one-off. You know, she inhabited that role. She felt something was hinky, but wasn't sure what. But it's not really until she's face to face with that death omen, you know, where she's like, whoa, Nelly, something's wrong in River City, you know. But once again, like the other police officers we've seen, she cannot deny the evidence of her own experience. And she's like, I don't know what this is, and I don't know why it's happening, but she saw it happen, and she goes with it from that point on. It's not what the heck, it's like, what is happening now that we need to deal with? Where is it coming from? Why is it here? What do we need to do? You know, she's willing to then go down that path. And that's why she's finally then able to see how her boyfriend has hoodwinked her, you know, because otherwise she was still like, you know, well, you know, he's a good guy and so on and so forth. No, he's not. But she can't see it until she sees the evidence for herself. And then she can conceive of it, You know, you can't, sometimes you almost can't conceive of something is what it said until you see some evidence of it yourself. And then you're like, aha, now I can conceive of all these things.
And
that's
some people can't even with the evidence. Some people,
Right.
it just,
But
they won't go
Right.
there.
But she was
yeah.
able to, and she's like, okay, this is undeniable. And you know, because there's the death omen and then they find the skeleton and she's like, well, how is she going to refute that? You know? And then she goes on, you know, now her, I could see just going on because she didn't have the trauma of both the death related to her and the shooting the way that Kathleen did. So her, I can see going on to her career, back to her career, sadder but wiser about both people because her boyfriend was a jerk and a murderer, and the fact that there's maybe more beyond the veil.
Lola?
What a perfect episode for Linda Blair, huh? And she doesn't look that much different than she did when she was a kid. You know, same face, same brown hair. I think it's cool that she loops back to Victor Hendrickson. Because I'm looking at the wiki and it reminded me that someone reports to Victor Hendrickson that Ballard swears up and down that the Winchesters save her life. So we bring Victor Hendrickson in again. And eventually she's recruited. Now this would have been an awesome spinoff to a countrywide group of cops who know the supernatural and help hunters. I don't remember that at all. How cool is that? I'm reading the wiki because I haven't seen this episode in probably 10 years, so I'm cheating. But it says, that's what it says. It says that she was in a countrywide group of cops.
That was me.
Oh, really? You were?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that once Gail asked me. That and the wiki made it. I guess they were including stuff from the novels in the wiki, which is awesome. But,
oh my God, really?
Yeah. So what I there was a character in Nevermore, a detective named McBain, who was a missing persons detective with the NYPD, and she mentions that there's a very, very small group of cops who know what's going on and help hunters out. There's only like 5 of them. There were 4 at this point. One of them was killed. And Ballard is one of them. And she basically joined that up afterward. Although there is concern that she may not be part of, might not be a cop anymore because of what happened in that episode. Because she's under investigation by Internal Affairs because, you know, of what happened. But one of the cops that I mentioned that McBain names the cops. One of them is a Chicago cop named Murphy, which is my little shout out to fans of the Dresden Files. Yeah. Well, and it's a cop from Chicago named Murphy, so it's sufficiently generic that you know I have plausible deniability.
In Boston. Yeah.
So have we left anybody out who was memorable? I mean, there were a lot of crooked cops and dumb cops and bad cops, but who did we leave out? Lola?
All right, so I really love the whole 1940s gangster and then FBI agent and noir, all that stuff. We had Elliot Ness. How cool is that? I mean, he was actually the guy from X-Files, but still, he was supposed to be Elliot Ness. You know, went back in time. Maybe the X-Files guy went back in time. I don't know. It could work. So I love that stuff. I love the noir stuff. So that's one of my most memorable characters.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dean got a whole new outfit out of it, which he rocked, you know.
And you know he loved it.
Even though history tells
Jensen
us
does love a little costuming.
even though history tells us that Elliot Ness was only 27 when he busted Al Capone.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So, you know, he's always been played by much older actors, and that's what's in our head. And when I had to look it up for a book I did, it was like, you gotta be kidding me. He was 27.
Well, remember in the 1940s, 27 was like our 47.
Yeah.
Because people only lived to like 30 or something. So
And they all lived a little longer than but
It was a little longer than that, yeah.
Bathtub gin and smoking.
Yes.
yes. So Keith and Carole, anybody else that sticks in your mind, either for good or bad?
I have to mention two people. So one is not strictly a police officer, but a forensic, one of the coroners, which would be Dr. Kara, who now I can't remember what episode it was, but you all know what I mean, where it was the
Siren
the
episode.
endorphins. Oh, it was the siren. Okay. And the endorphins, and then she and Sam had a little office interlude there and stuff.
And she
was certainly
no.
what?
And she lived as far
And
as
she
we know.
lived. She was one of the few to survive the peen of death.
Sam's dick of death, yes.
So she was, but she was once again very sharp, very competent, you know, and made us suspect her just because she was in fact so smart and so competent. We were like, well, she must be the bad guy.
Sex and violence.
The other is just from a humorous aspect from LARP and the Real Girl. And we had the sheriff with the big walrus mustache. And he was talking about, oh, these kids with their texting and their murder. And that just never fails to crack me up when oh, these kids, they're texting and they're murder.
Keith, how about you?
I'm trying to can't think of anybody specific that we haven't already talked about. Yeah, I was gonna mention Ballard. You know, there was and I had fun with McBain in Nevermore, but that would be self-serving to talk about that. So I wouldn't. But
That comes to my mind is in the episode where Amara is born, and she and Dean take the baby to her parents out of town, trying to get the baby away from the Black Veiny Plague, which is actually Amara. And again, she's doing her best to save somebody under really bad conditions. And of course it doesn't turn out, but she gave it her best.
I was a little distracted with that because she has a very distinctive look. She had a very, you know, like young, a very innocent face, big eyes, this really distinctive appearance. And we saw her because, of course, using the whole Vancouver pool of actors, there's a number of repeated people. And most of the time, I don't even realize it, or I realize it later, but it's not enough to take me out. When I saw the one with Sully, I didn't immediately go, oh my gosh, the mom is the real estate lady, you know, and I was fine with it. But with her, as soon as I saw her, all I could think about was that she was the virgin for Rick Worthy's Alpha Vamp. And that was it. I could not buy her after that as a police officer. I was gone.
It actually took me a while to realize that Jody was the mom in The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Oh,
she was in a Voyager episode too,
Yeah.
which I'd forgotten until I got to. I'm doing a rewatch of Star Trek Voyager for Tor.com, and I got to the episode Ashes and said Kim Rhodes. I'm like, wait a minute, because she was covered in like alien makeup and stuff, so I didn't recognize her at
most
first.
of the time,
And it's like, no wonder that voice is so familiar.
like I said, with the mom, you know, the real estate agent, you all who know who I mean, in Bugs, where she's like, you know, and we're open to everybody of any sexual, you know, and then the mom who's got sparkle on her face, and she played it so well both times that I wasn't taken aback. And there's numerous, of course, instances, because Vancouver pool of actors, no
Yes,
problem.
there were only 15 actors in Vancouver.
For her, it just was like, no, she's the virgin for the vampires. What is she doing being a police? Did she leave and become a police?
Well, that's like when you realize Nancy the Virgin in Juice and Bellow is the forensics professional.
On Lucifer, yeah.
And she's fantastic. Oh my
Yes.
God, I'm such a huge fan of hers. And even in that one shot episode of her in Justin Bellow, you knew so much about Nancy.
Yeah.
You know, she gave us everything about Nancy. And now as Ella.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love her.
And
she's-
her line as Nancy
she's a
on,
wonderful
if I
singer.
get through this, I'm going to have so much sex.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
No, not with you.
But not with you.
I'm still waiting for Mark Pellegrino to show up on Lucifer. This is just something that has to happen. And I mean, Rob Benedict showed up. He was
Yes,
it was a really
he did.
terrible
Oh my
French accent.
gosh, that was great.
But,
Well, and Richard Speight Jr. has directed.
yeah,
So
yeah. In fact, I think he directed the episode that Benedict was in.
Oh, I think you're right.
Yeah,
well, folks,
probably why he cast him. It's like, hey, Rob.
Nepotism.
oh, well, hey, thank you guys so much for coming and talking about law enforcement, the thin blue salt line and all that. I know we're going to finish this up and then hang up and go, oh, I should have said, because that's the way it always works. But there will be other times. So thank you all so much for being wonderful panelists. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up on Continual. So we'll see you online.